My name is Lawrence Hill. I'm a essayist and novelist and screenwriter, mostly novelist. And my latest book, 10th, is called The Illegal, and it's a novel about an elite marathoner who flees genocide in his native country and goes into hiding as an undocumented refugee in a rich nation that does not want him. Scurrilous is pretty good. Flagellate isn't so bad. I've always had fun with 3 or 4 syllable words that kind of have a playful sound to them. And I like to fool around with them with my children a lot too. Even now that they're grown, they like to hear me joking around with language. And playfulness in language has always been a great joy to me. Well, there's lots of people I'd love to have dinner with. How about Malcolm X? He'd be a pretty amazing dinner partner. I'd like to ask him a lot of questions. I mean, he sort of revolutionized notions of language and blackness. With his clashes with Martin Luther King, he sort of overthrew, the popular use of the word Negro in the 1950s and 60s, and insisted, sort of in a wave of black affirmation, that word should sort of go by the wayside, and black or other such words, African American, should be adopted. And instead, a fascinating man with a fascinating life transition. He went from being hateful to being loving, before his own assassination. And so he'd be quite an amazing dinner partner. Justin Trudeau wouldn't be so bad either. Well, all that depends on whether I'm eating for health or for indulgence. If it were just one thing and I really just wanted to go crazy, I guess I'd say cornbread, which I've always loved to make, and I make it for my wife and kids, and I've always played around with recipes. And I can't follow a recipe, I just invent, but I've got a pretty good cornbread going. So if I had to just eat one thing and I could indulge, I'd say cornbread. If I were locked in a library overnight, that's such a hilarious question, because just the other night I was imagining the idea that I wandered into a library one day to research the next book and never came out. And years later, somebody found this scraggly, bearded hobo living and sleeping in the stacks of the Robarts Library at the University of Toronto, because I'd never got out from all those books and just lived in the stacks. It's kind of like a fantasy of mine. But you'd probably find me in the literary section of the Robarts Library at the U of T, bearded and shoeless, and with a sleeping bag. Is writer's block a real thing? Well, I guess that depends on the writer. I just try to avoid paralysis by forcing myself to move forward. And if I can't move forward on page 1 of chapter 1, I'll just jump into chapter 2 or chapter 9, or write the ending, or write something, or just let it rip until the juices start flowing again and I can find my way back to the page. If I'm stuck somewhere, which I often am because I don't know what I'm doing or haven't figured it out, I just go somewhere else and start writing another piece of the story until I can loosen up and come back to what I thought I was trying to write before. Sometimes I manage to get back there, other times not. So I just try to keep moving, kind of like in a marathon. You can't stop moving, you got to get to the finish line. I adopt the same approach in writing novels.